Welcome to Topicia Inner Clarity.
Thank you for having me.
Before we do anything else, I just want you, the listener, to take a slow, deep breath.
Just settle in.
Right. Settle into wherever you are right now. Whether you're walking or driving or just sitting quietly in a room, let your shoulders drop.
Unclench your jaw.
Yeah, because for the next while, the outside world, with all of its noise and its demands, its endless sense of manufactured urgency, it is on pause.
Completely on pause.
You've stepped into a space designed specifically for your mind, a space to untangle the knots, to lower your defenses, and to look inward. Today, we're going to talk about your peace.
And how fragile it can feel.
Exactly. More specifically, we're going to talk about how fiercely the world tries to steal that peace from you. And, more importantly, how you can build an architecture within yourself so strong, so impenetrable, that no one and nothing can ever take it away.
It is a profound privilege to share this quiet space with you today.
We are embarking on a deep dive into the research surrounding an ancient, really profound way of living. We're looking at the Stoic philosophy of mastering the mind.
Guided by the wisdom of thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca.
Yeah. And as we navigate the research today, we'll be synthesizing a truly fascinating stack of insights. It's not just history.
No, not at all. We are bringing together the ancient texts of the Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius' personal journal, the meditations alongside modern neuroscience.
Right, and the foundational principles of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Even the psychology of modern self-defense.
It's all connected. The mission we are undertaking right now is highly specific, and it's deeply practical for your daily life. We want to help you build what the Stoics called an inner citadel.
An impregnable fortress within your own mind.
Imagine that. A place where external provocations, insults, the sheer chaos of everyday life, they simply slide off the walls.
This is really about reclaiming your emotional energy. It's learning to stand entirely firm in your own center, regardless of the storm outside.
So let's start by looking at the reality of that storm, because the world we're living in right now, it is explicitly wired to provoke you.
It expects you to snap.
It wants you to take the bait, to lash out, to constantly explain yourself, and to feel this incessant need to prove something.
Think about the sheer anatomy of a modern provocation. Just look at your phone.
Yeah, constantly buzzing.
Buzzing with notifications designed by behavioral engineers to trigger a dopamine loop. People in your life, whether intentionally or unconsciously, are testing your boundaries.
There is this ambient chaos pressing in from all sides. And the research points out something deeply unsettling, but undeniably true.
Our modern society actually profits off your emotional chaos.
It profits off of it. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. Why does the world push us so hard to snap?
Well, if we look at the structural mechanics of our attention economy, the answer is remarkably simple. An emotionally reactive person is a predictable person.
They are easier to influence.
Easier to distract. And frankly, easier to monetize. The systems around us are built to make you move without thinking.
To make you speak without clarity.
And to make you feel without a shred of control. When you are caught in a cycle of outrage or defensiveness, your executive function it shuts down.
Your attention is hijacked.
You're no longer the author of your own actions. You are just a nervous system responding to stimuli.
I think we all know exactly what that feels like. I want you to picture this in your own life right now. Really put yourself in this moment.
We've all been there.
You're in a high-stakes meeting, you present a project you've worked on for weeks, and a coworker blatantly mocks your idea.
Showing you explicit disrespect in front of your boss.
In front of your peers. Or, on a more mundane level, you're driving home completely exhausted and someone aggressively cuts you off.
Nearly causing an accident.
Right, and then they flip you off as if it were your fault. We all know that physical gut reaction.
Heat suddenly floods your chest.
Your jaw tightens. Your heart rate spikes. Every single fiber of your being is screaming at you to fire back.
To defend your honor.
To escalate the situation. It's an intoxicating, almost overwhelming urge to retaliate.
And that surge of adrenaline and indignation is precisely what the Stoics recognized as the ultimate trap.
The trap.
Yes, because giving in to that urge is the equivalent of handing over the remote control of your emotional state to a complete stranger.
Or a hostile colleague.
Exactly. You are effectively saying, here, you dictate my heart rate, you dictate my peace of mind for the rest of the day.
But the Stoics offer a radical alternative to this. In a world that is practically begging you to lose your mind, staying calm becomes an act of profound rebellion.
Self-control becomes your greatest, most disruptive strategy.
Stillness becomes your ultimate strength. The Stoic philosophers aimed for a state they called ataraxia, or sometimes apatheia.
Now, we need to be very careful with the translation here because the research emphasizes that this does not mean apathy in the modern negative sense.
It doesn't mean becoming a cold, unfeeling robot who just doesn't care about anything.
Right.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Because when people hear emotional tranquility or ignoring insults, it can sound a lot like, well, being a doormat.
It's a common fear.
If I just sit there and let my coworker mock me in the boardroom, doesn't that just communicate weakness? How does ataraxia not just turn you into a passive participant in your own life?
That is the most common and perhaps the most dangerous misconception about Stoicism. Ataraxia is not passivity. It is clarity.
Clarity.
It is a state of emotional tranquility and freedom from excessive, disturbing passions.
Mm-hmm.
It is the ability to feel an emotion, to feel that heat in your chest, acknowledge it, and then rationally decide whether it serves you to act on it.
Ah, okay.
A doormat is walked over because it has no boundaries. A person operating from the inner citadel observes the attack, recognizes it as a reflection of the attacker's flawed character, and responds from a place of calculated strategy rather than blind panic.
So you're still responding, but on your terms.
Right. Exactly. Imagine what it would feel like to possess a mind so incredibly strong, so well fortified, that absolutely no comment, no insult, no passive-aggressive email could ever breach your peace.
You walk through the fire, but you don't let the flames touch your skin.
You feel the heat, but you do not flail. You remain in command.
That distinction changes everything. You feel the heat, but you don't flail. So the obvious question for you listening right now is, how do we actually build that architecture?
How do we get to a place where we aren't just aggressively suppressing our anger, but genuinely not feeling harmed by the provocation in the first place?
To answer this, the research points us directly to Epictetus. And we really need to pause and look at who Epictetus was, because his biography validates his entire philosophy.
We aren't talking about an emperor in a palace here.
No, Epictetus was born into slavery in the Roman Empire. He lived with absolute zero physical freedom, zero bodily autonomy. He was subject to the whims of a master.
Yet, out of that horrifying lack of external control, he developed the ultimate framework for internal freedom.
In Chapter 1 of his famous handbook, The Enchiridion, he introduces a concept that is the foundation of everything we're talking about today. The Greek phrase is omen,
which translates roughly to within our power or up to us.
This is known as the dichotomy of control.
And the dichotomy of control is the bedrock of the inner citadel. Without it, the walls crumble.
The research details exactly what Epictetus categorized as being in our control versus what is completely outside our control.
Within our power are our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, our opinions, our motivations, our desires, and our aversions.
In short, our own internal character, our judgments and our choices.
Outside our power, our bodies, our property, our wealth, our reputation, our social standing, the weather, the economy, and crucially, what other people say or do.
I have to stop you there because this is where modern listeners, myself included, usually hit a wall.
It's a tough concept to swallow at first.
It really is. If I eat right and go to the gym, I have some control over my body. If I work hard and act with integrity, I have control over my reputation. Saying these things are outside our power feels incredibly fatalistic. It feels like telling people not to try.
It absolutely feels that way until we unpack what Epictetus meant by control. The research emphasizes that this is about causality, not absolute control or influence.
Causality.
Yes. Yes, you can go to the gym and eat well, which influences your health. But can you absolutely 100% guarantee you won't get a genetic illness or be struck by a car tomorrow?
No.
No. You can act with perfect integrity your entire life, but can you prevent someone from starting a malicious rumor about you that ruins your reputation?
No, you can't.
You have influence, but you are not the final absolute cause. You only have absolute causality over your judgments and your choices. When we confuse these two categories, when we mistake what is outside our absolute control for something we have sovereignty over, the consequences are devastating.
Because we attach our peace of mind to things that are inherently fragile.
Precisely. If you believe you can control your reputation and someone slanders you, you will experience profound grief, anxiety, and a sense of deep injustice.
You'll be constantly at odds with the world because the world will not always comply with your wishes.
People will misunderstand you. Markets will crash. Traffic will stall.
But if you deeply internalize that your reputation is not up to you and that only your response to the slander is up to you, you become invincible.
You shift your entire center of gravity from the unpredictable external world to the entirely predictable internal world.
Think about what that means for that moment when someone tries to get under your skin. There is a quote from Epictetus in the research that it stops you in your tracks.
He says, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation.
Ouch. That hits incredibly hard. Because it means the coworker mocking you didn't actually make you angry. They just made a noise.
You made yourself angry by agreeing with the provocation.
It shifts the entire paradigm. It forces a radical accountability that is very uncomfortable at first. It moves the focus entirely away from blaming the provocateur, which is a powerless position, and directs it entirely toward disciplining yourself.
Which is a position of ultimate power. The provocateur offers you a transaction. They hand you an insult. You have to actively reach out, take it, and process it as harm for the transaction to be complete.
Because the space between what they do and how you react that space is your entire kingdom.
As Viktor Frankl later echoed, in that space lies our freedom to choose our response.
You are the sovereign ruler of that pause, and in that moment of provocation, you face a choice. You either guard your kingdom, or you abandon the throne, hand the crown to the person insulting you, and let them dictate your emotional state.
And guarding that kingdom requires understanding the precise mechanics of how our minds process these events.
The research introduces a vital Stoic concept here called the hegemonikon.
This translates roughly to the guiding principle, or the ruling executive part of the soul. You can think of the hegemonikon as the gatekeeper, or the internal command center.
When an event happens in the external world, a stimulus, a provocation, a rude comment, it presents itself to the mind as a representation or an impression.
The hegemonikon is the internal dialogue that assesses and judges this representation before we react to it. It is the faculty that decides what a thing means.
The texts we've gathered use a really brilliant, simple analogy to explain how the hegemonikon can either protect us or betray us. Let's walk through it.
It's about differentiating between objective and subjective representations.
Right. An objective representation is simply stating the facts as they exist in reality, stripped of all emotional judgment, narrative, and ego. So the objective representation is, this is a small, green, spherical fruit. It is a grape.
But our minds, especially when untamed, rarely stop there. We immediately add a subjective emotional layer.
Our hegemonikon rushes in and creates a subjective representation. This grape is disgusting. It's too squishy. This is terrible.
And this framework is exactly how we process insults and provocations in the real world. Let's go back to the boardroom.
Your coworker calls your idea stupid.
The objective representation, the absolute, undeniable reality of the physical situation, is just that specific sound waves move through the air, vibrating your eardrums.
Or, if it was an email, specific pixels arrange themselves on a digital screen. That is the entirety of what actually happened in the physical universe.
The subjective representation, however, is your hegemonikon adding the agonizing judgment. I have been disrespected, my career is in jeopardy, everyone thinks I'm incompetent, I have been deeply harmed.
And the Stoic secret weapon, the core defense of the inner citadel, is realizing that if you can intercept and suppress that inner discourse that says, I have been harmed, the harm literally disappears.
It ceases to exist.
Because, as Marcus Aurelius wrote, things cannot touch the soul. They are outside of us. The words are just sound waves. They cannot physically reach inside your chest and twist your stomach into knots.
You have to grant them permission to do that by assenting to the judgment that you've been hurt. You have to agree with the insult for it to do damage.
This ancient wisdom isn't just poetic philosophical musing. It is deeply rooted in how our brains physically function.
The modern neuroscience data we're looking at shows a direct, undeniable connection between Stoicism and modern psychological science.
Stoicism is widely recognized in the clinical literature as the original philosophical inspiration for cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Which is fascinating because CBT is considered the absolute gold standard today for treating anxiety, depression, and emotional dysregulation.
And when you strip away the modern clinical jargon, it's basically applied Stoicism.
It is entirely applied Stoicism. Modern psychology calls this specific practice cognitive reappraisal. It is the learned ability to reframe an event before you react to it.
Neurologically, when you are provoked, your amygdala, the primitive emotional center of the brain, fires up immediately.
It screams threat and initiates the fight or flight response. That's the heat in your chest.
But cognitive reappraisal engages the prefrontal cortex, the logical executive part of your brain. You catch the subjective judgment, this person is ruining my life by cutting me off in traffic. And you use your prefrontal cortex to reappraise it back to the objective reality.
A car merged in front of me. The driver's in a hurry.
You are literally using logic to cool down the nervous system.
Exactly. And the research notes that Marcus Aurelius essentially practiced cognitive reappraisal nightly 2,000 years before brain scans existed.
He would sit with his journal, which became the Meditations, and actively reframe the day's insults, the betrayals of his generals, the pressures of the empire.
He would strip away the subjective judgments, returning the events to their objective reality, and turning them into opportunities to practice patience and wisdom.
And modern neuroplasticity proves that he was right. Studies show that actively practicing cognitive reappraisal physically strengthens the neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex that govern self-control.
You are not just changing your mind. You are literally, physically rewiring your brain for calmness.
It's like building a muscle. Every time you intercept an insult and refuse to add the judgment of harm, you are doing a rep in the gym of the mind.
So let's take this rewired brain, this fortified inner citadel, and walk it back out into the real world.
Let's look at the social dynamic of this, because when you start maintaining that level of internal control, it deeply fundamentally changes how you interact with the people who are actively trying to provoke you.
Let's dissect the psychology of the provocateur. Why do people provoke us in the first place?
Looking at the behavioral psychology in our notes, it becomes very clear. Most of the time, when someone is picking a fight, being passive-aggressive, or throwing out a sarcastic jab, they do not want true, meaningful connection.
They want compliance. They want your energy. They want a reaction.
They want to pull you into their frame.
In social dynamics, a psychological frame is the unspoken context, the underlying assumptions, and the rules of an interaction.
The provocateur wants to drag you into a game where they feel dominant, where they set the terms, and where they know exactly how the script plays out.
They poke you. You get predictably defensive, and they get to feel superior, or perhaps they get to play the victim. It's a deeply ingrained behavioral loop for them.
But when you react impulsively, when you give in to that amygdala-driven instinct to defend yourself and scream back, you are stepping right into their frame.
You are handing them the script.
You literally become a supporting character in their scene. You prove to them that you can be summoned, triggered, and poked into motion like a toy with buttons.
You give away your energy, your dignity, and your clarity, all to participate in a game you never wanted to play.
Which brings us to one of the most powerful and, frankly, most intimidating tools in the Stoic arsenal, the weapon of stillness.
When we talk about responding to provocation, we often think of the perfect comeback, the sharpest retort.
But there is a specific kind of silence, a grounded, unwavering silence that unnerves people far more than any scream or brilliant argument ever could.
Oh, absolutely. Think about a time you've experienced that, either giving it or receiving it. That heavy, intentional silence.
Someone throws a barbed comment at you, expecting you to flinch or argue back, and instead you just look at them. You don't scowl, you don't smile, you just observe them.
Almost immediately, they start to shift in their seat.
They start talking way too fast to fill the void, or they start backpedaling, or they try even harder, more desperately to get under your skin because the original tactic failed.
Why does it unnerve them so deeply? Because they cannot manipulate stillness.
A provocateur needs your momentum to use against you, like a judo throw. If you offer no momentum, they stumble.
They don't know what you are thinking, they don't know how you'll respond, or if you will respond at all.
That uncertainty shatters their frame and completely exposes their desperate need for dominance.
As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best answer to anger is silence.
When you introduce silence, the toxicity of their comment is left hanging in the air, belonging entirely to them. You haven't taken ownership of it.
And it's so important to realize that this kind of silence isn't about being empty or being afraid to speak or not having a good comeback. It's about total, overwhelming control.
It's about knowing exactly what you feel, observing the heat in your chest, but having the absolute mastery of your hegemonicon to decide that it does not serve you to express it.
You don't need to swing back. You don't need to prove you are smarter or wittier or louder. All you need to do is categorically refuse to play their game.
This leads to a fascinating behavioral dynamic that psychologists often call the paradox of explanations.
Frequently, when we encounter toxic behavior, whether in a relationship, a friendship, or at work, and we decide to maintain our peace, we still feel this immense, lingering pressure to explain our boundaries.
We feel the need to send the long text message, to pull them aside and tell them exactly why their behavior is unacceptable and why we are stepping back.
But the clinical perspective on this points out a hard truth. People who consistently push your boundaries, who consistently disrespect you, will always demand reasons for your distance. But they already know the reasons.
They don't want an explanation to understand you better or to grow. They want an explanation so they have raw material to argue against.
They want you to lay out your feelings so they can invalidate them line by line. They expect it a back and forth.
When they get absolute calm, boundary setting, and silence instead, it completely derails them. Calm is a language they simply do not speak.
The profound takeaway for you listening right now is this. The people who truly respect you will rarely need a lengthy, agonizing explanation for your boundaries. They will notice your discomfort and adjust.
And the ones who consistently disrespect you simply do not deserve the energy of an explanation.
Walking away in silence, closing a door without a sound, teaches you so much about your own internal architecture.
It echoes Aristotle's wisdom that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. By choosing silence over chaos, you learn what you will and will not tolerate. You sharpen your own instincts.
You prove to yourself that your peace is more valuable than being right in a pointless argument.
It's a massive paradigm shift, but let's be incredibly real for a moment. It is really, really hard.
It goes against our conditioning.
When someone disrespects you, your ego screams for retaliation. It demands instant justice. It wants them to hurt the way you perceive you have been hurt.
How do we negotiate with the ego in that moment?
The Stoics, particularly Seneca, had a brilliant, almost humorous way of looking at this to deflate the ego's demands.
Seneca wrote, "It is the part of a great mind to despise wrongs done to it. The most contemptuous form of revenge is not to deem one's adversary worth taking vengeance upon."
And Marcus Aurelius echoes this perfectly. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury.
Seneca used a very evocative analogy to illustrate this mindset, and it's incredibly useful for spatial distancing yourself from the emotional immediacy of an insult.
He said, a truly great person is like a large, majestic, wild animal that listens completely unmoved to the tiny curs and dogs barking frantically at its feet.
He pointed out the absurdity of retaliation by saying, if a mule kicked you, you wouldn't get down on all fours and try to kick it back. If a dog bit you, you wouldn't bite it back.
You would simply observe the behavior, recognize the nature of the animal, and say, well, that is what dogs and mules do.
That's what mules do.
I love that so much. It takes the personal sting right out of it. When that coworker undermines you or that driver cuts you off, you just observe it as a feature of their unrefined nature in that moment, not as a reflection of your worth.
You don't get down on all fours and bark back.
But, and this is a crucial pivot, this brings up a very practical, almost dangerous question. If we are completely detached from insults, at what point do we actually protect ourselves?
Because if someone is actively threatening your physical safety or your livelihood, taking a deep breath and ignoring them isn't stoic, it's suicidal.
I noticed the research brought in the perspective of modern self-defense psychology here, which feels necessary.
It is absolutely necessary because there is a persistent myth that stoicism equals pacifism or being a willing victim. That is historically and philosophically false.
The Stoics were intimately acquainted with violence. Many were soldiers, statesmen, and wrestlers. They understood the harsh, unforgiving realities of the world.
But their philosophy dictates a strict hierarchy of response, governed always by reason, never by ego. If they have the choice, a Stoic will always prefer tranquility over a petty fight.
The research incorporates the perspective of renowned self-defense expert Tim Larkin to clarify the modern application of this. Larkin deals in the reality of violence, and his philosophy aligns perfectly with Stoic ataraxia.
Larkin introduces something he calls the 3-day test, and it is brilliant for cutting through the fog of adrenaline.
When your ego is threatened, when someone is in your face at a bar or road rage escalates, and you feel that overwhelming surge to step out of the car and teach them a lesson, you must pause and ask yourself this specific question.
3 days from now, if I'm sitting in a jail cell facing assault charges or laying in a pine box, was this escalation worth it?
And in almost every single ego-driven conflict, the answer is a resounding, undeniable no. It is never worth it.
Larkin emphasizes that it is always critical to de-escalate a potentially violent situation if possible. Walk away. Apologize even if you aren't wrong, just to diffuse the ego of the aggressor.
The Stoic avoids the fight, not out of cowardice, but because they value their own inner order, their freedom, and their life far too much to risk it over something as fragile and meaningless as a bruised ego.
You do not let a stranger dictate your physical safety.
But the caveat is crucial, and it's where the inner citadel becomes literal armor. The research states that if it is genuinely impossible to de-escalate, if you are cornered, if someone has crossed the line from a social provocation to an unavoidable physical threat against you or your family, and violence is the absolute only answer for survival, then it must be applied swiftly, decisively, and devastatingly.
As the research notes, 99.99% of the time, a Stoic won't respond to a provocation. But that 0.01% of the time, when reason has failed and survival is on the line, they act without hesitation.
It's not born of anger, it's born of necessity.
It's about the appropriate application of force, both mental and physical, always guided by the hegemonicon.
But let's bring it back from the extremes to the 99.99% of daily life, where the attacks are verbal, emotional, or professional.
Because even when we aren't facing physical danger, we still suffer immensely. Seneca reminds us of a profound truth. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality.
Oh, this is a massive point. Think about how often we lie awake at 3 a.m. having imaginary arguments with people in our heads.
We anticipate the pain of a confrontation before it's even necessary.
We draft the angry email in our minds 10 times over. We fear the loss of respect, or we agonize over what a friend might say about us.
The actual event might take 5 seconds, but we suffer through it for 5 weeks in our minds.
We project into the future, assuming the worst, or conversely, we suffer because we hold on to an idealized, imaginary version of a person from the past, rather than seeing them as they truly are in the present.
We feel deeply betrayed when someone acts selfishly, not necessarily because they changed, but because we refused to see the reality of who they were from the beginning. We suffered because reality did not match our imagination.
So how do we practically apply this to the complexities of business, friendship, and love? How do we stop suffering in our imagination?
The research gives us a very clear, grounded directive. Trust patterns over promises.
Watch how people act when they don't need anything from you. Watch how they behave when the spotlight is off, when there is no reward for being kind.
The Stoic discipline of perception involves ruthlessly separating appearances from reality. Someone might have all the right charming words. They might promise the world, apologize profusely, and swear they will change.
But if their historical actions consistently fail to align with those words, the words are objectively meaningless.
By observing patterns calmly, analytically, without letting our own desperate wishes or fears cloud our vision, we stop the exhausting cycle of unmet expectations.
We stop feeling constantly disappointed because we accept the absolute truth of what is in front of us. And truth, even when it is uncomfortable or painful, is infinitely more useful than a comforting illusion.
That brings us to a really profound crossroads in this deep dive. We've talked extensively about how to block the attacks, how to build the citadel, how to see reality clearly, and how to govern our own reactions.
But we haven't fully addressed the why. Why do people act this way? Why do people act hatefully, selfishly, or cruelly?
When you are on the receiving end of toxic behavior, it feels deeply personal.
But the Stoic view on human failure is actually incredibly compassionate, and it requires a profound shift in perspective to truly grasp.
It does, and it is perhaps the most challenging aspect of Stoicism to integrate. When we look at the philosophical texts, we have to dive into the Stoic view of ignorance.
When someone wrongs us, our immediate amygdala-driven assumption is malice. We think, they're evil, they knew this would hurt me, and they did it anyway because they want me to suffer.
But Stoicism posits a radically different theory. All vice, all harmful action, all cruelty stems fundamentally from ignorance.
As the ancient philosophers stated, every soul is deprived of the truth against its will.
I really want us to sit with that phrase for a second. Deprived of the truth against its will.
That is such a striking, empathetic way to view humanity. It means that when someone acts terribly, they aren't necessarily a comic book villain reveling in evil.
They are essentially suffering from a profound misjudgment of values. They mistakenly believe that their cruel action will somehow bring them good or protect their fragile ego or make them happy.
They are fundamentally confused about what is truly valuable in life. They think power or bringing someone else down is a good.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of maintaining ataraxia, recognizing this ignorance changes our entire emotional response to provocation.
Think of it this way. If a person who is literally blind accidentally bumps into you on the street and steps on your foot, you don't fly into a boiling rage and accuse them of maliciously attacking you.
You recognize they lack the faculty of sight, and you probably help them steady themselves.
The Stoics argue that moral ignorance is a form of blindness. If someone is acting out of a kind of moral blindness, unable to see that virtue and community are the only true goods, responding to them with boiling rage is as irrational as screaming at the blind person.
Instead, the Stoics argue we should respond with pity, with gentleness, and where appropriate and possible, with a desire to educate.
It's about seeing them as flawed, stumbling human beings rather than deliberate monsters. It strips away the personal offense. They aren't attacking you, they are just flailing in the dark.
And this leads directly into a massive, essential component of the philosophy that the research highlights, the discipline of action.
Because, and this is so important to clarify, Stoics don't just detach from the world. They don't build the inner citadel, pull up the drawbridge, and sit alone in the dark, observing humanity from afar and never getting involved.
It is not an isolationist philosophy. This is where Stoicism diverges from some other ascetic traditions.
The discipline of action insists that we must engage with the world, and we must do so responsibly and vigorously.
We have to enter into relations with our fellow creatures. We have to be parents, citizens, leaders, and friends.
And the truly challenging part, we must love them even if they act hatefully toward us.
Why? Because we share a common rationality. We are all part of the same human community, the same grand cosmic fabric. To hate another person is to act against nature.
The texts emphasize that our actions must be driven by pure moral intention. We aren't acting kindly just to get a reward or to build our reputation or to look good on social media.
We're acting for the good of the whole. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that what is not good for the hive is not good for the bee.
It's an interconnected ecosystem. If you poison the community with retaliation and anger, you are ultimately poisoning the water you yourself have to drink.
But maintaining this high-level benevolent perspective when you are down in the mud of daily conflicts, when the emails are flying and the traffic is gridlocked, is incredibly difficult.
To combat this tunnel vision, the Stoics utilize a specific, highly effective mental exercise. The research refers to it as the cosmic perspective, or the view from above.
Psychologists today might call it extreme spatial decentering and temporal distancing.
I absolutely love this exercise. It is the ultimate antidote to feeling overwhelmed. It's basically zooming out on the map of existence.
Imagine your life right now, your current argument, your stress about the mortgage, the frustration with your boss.
Imagine floating up above your house. You see your neighborhood. Then you zoom out further and you see your entire city, millions of people, all with their own crushing anxieties and fleeting triumphs.
Zoom out again. You see the continent, you see the whole spinning globe, a pale blue dot suspended in the absolute dark void of space.
And then you zoom out through time.
The Meditations describe this exercise with breathtaking clarity. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, leading armies and an empire, wrote, "The infinity of past and future gapes before us, a chasm whose depth we cannot see. So it would take an idiot to feel self-importance or distress, or any indignation either, as if the things that irritate us lasted."
When you really let that sink in, when you look at the repetitive nature of human existence, empires rising and falling, generations living and dying, billions of people experiencing the exact same petty squabbles, the same heartbreak, the same fleeting joys over thousands and thousands of years.
The sheer weight of your personal suffering just shrinks.
The sting of that coworker's insult in the boardroom, it evaporates in the face of infinity. It feels ridiculous to be angry about it.
And it's not about making your life feel meaningless. It's about right-sizing your problems. It significantly reduces the friction of daily provocations. It gives you room to breathe.
It completely removes the heavy, suffocating burden of the ego. When you realize that you are not the center of the universe, an insult against you is no longer a cosmic injustice that must be righted. It is just a tiny, fleeting breeze in the grand expanse of time.
The view from above allows you to step out of the claustrophobic room of your own immediate reactions and step into the vast, open air of perspective. It is the final, sweeping defense of the inner citadel.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this right now as you go about your day? We've journeyed through some incredibly dense, life-altering concepts in this deep dive.
We talked about recognizing the modern trap, the societal infrastructure that begs you to lose your mind.
We discussed building that inner citadel through the dichotomy of control, ruthlessly separating what is truly yours from what belongs to the unpredictable world.
We explored the power of the pause, taking sovereign ownership of the space between an event and your reaction, and using the hegemonicon and cognitive reappraisal to strip away the subjective judgment of harm.
We've examined how absolute, unshakable silence can be the ultimate power move against a provocateur seeking your energy.
We've learned to view the cruelty of others as a tragic symptom of moral ignorance rather than pure malice, allowing us to respond with pity rather than rage.
And finally, we've seen how taking the cosmic perspective can instantly diffuse our daily outrage, right-sizing our egos in the face of infinity.
It is a complete mental rewiring. It is a lifelong practice, not a weekend life hack.
And as we wrap up our time together today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to carry with you into your week. What if the next time someone tries to provoke you, the next time they cut you off in traffic, or insult your work, or test your boundaries, instead of seeing them as an enemy attacking your peace, you view them as an unconscious collaborator in your own philosophical training?
That is a brilliant reframe. It raises an important question. What if they are just a necessary weight at the gym, placed there specifically by circumstances to help you build the muscle of your inner citadel?
You cannot build strength without resistance. You cannot practice patience without someone being annoying. You cannot practice forgiveness without someone causing offense.
Exactly. They aren't an obstacle to your peace. They are the exact material you need to practice your peace.
The obstacle becomes the way. Thank you for sharing this intimate space with us today. Remind yourself, no matter what happens out there, to hold your center. You have the tools, you have the kingdom, and the throne is yours. Join us next time on Topikia Inner Clarity for another journey into the mind. Take care of yourself.